give you this lecture, talk about the Vedic view of health and its science. It's important, the three things in here. One is health, and one is Vedic view, and another one is science. So, health is an important thing. Where it comes from, the word health comes from Old English, which is health, and that comes from German, which is helito, which means whole. And since we are talking in terms of from Vedic perspective, the word for health is swast. That means the word, the term ast comes the same as like stop, which means that's where it is, and swa means self. So when you stop in self, that's swast, and that's when you are healthy. So it's in a way, I mean that in today's world, we think, at least from Indian perspective or Vedic perspective, it is holistic. It's not just I will talk a little bit about the science, which is science is very reductionist. It goes into the smallest piece and then tries to understand where the problem is, and so that becomes science. Of course, being yourself in biochemistry, to understand it well. So the Vedic view is the holistic view, which health means to holistically stay in self, which I think English has the same similar meaning, the health meaning, and that indicates to me that whenever these ideas came, they were similar. It didn't matter whether it was Europe or Asia. I think that when people had these ideas, it was very, very similar, and people looked at life very holistically. But the science has made advancement, and we understand science much better, at least in modern language. So I think it's important that to explain this idea in a scientific way also, so that there is a compatibility of understanding. So keeping that in mind, what is the holistic goal of life? Normally people will agree the freedom, the independence, and equality. How do we get freedom? It is an issue how we go about it. So we talk about freedom, political freedom, we have economic freedom, things like that. We have freedom of expression. In America, we have freedom of bear arms. All kind of, everybody is looking for all kind of days. We have, Independence Day. We think we have become independent, but it is true, we have become independent of somebody else's domination, for example, colonization or whatever. And then the question of equality, only that comes. The question is now how to make it a holistic, and what is the procedure that we can do. And for that, I think there is a means. The way to do this is this, at least from Vedic perspective, it is the yoga. The practice of yoga is very important, and you will see some of the meanings of this, and people have a little bit of practice, then they understand it better. So the Patanjali was one of the very early composer of yoga sutras. Yogas are much older than Patanjali, but he is somebody who compiled, just like we today compile a lot of observations and come up with some theories or whatever. So he basically did that, and his first sutra said Ath Yoga Anusasanam. It is not written here, this is the second one. The first one said Ath means now, Yoga means yoga, Anusasanam means discipline. Now we follow the discipline of yoga. That means the discipline was there before to follow it. That's how he says that now we follow the discipline of yoga. The second one he says Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. It's only 3 words in here. It's very interesting. Yoga means yoga. Chitta is consciousness, and the vritti is whatever its traits are, features are. What is the feature and trait of consciousness? Well, we loosely define, it could be thoughts, it could be mind, it could be what you say. All that thing means chitta vritti. So, and nirodha means, is very interesting, many times people say it means to stop, control, seize, all kind of word. But the Sanskrit meaning is rodha means resistance. Ni means no resistance. Why? I mean, this is, when somebody comes from science background can understand better. When there is no resistance, that means there is nothing moving. As long as there is moving, nothing can move. Even if it is in the air, there is some resistance of the air. If it is on the floor or the bus or truck on the road, there is a resistance, that's why it can move. So when there is no resistance, when there is nothing to move, then there is no resistance. That basically means yoga is when your consciousness, the traits of your consciousness, whether it is thoughts or your mind or your words, they stop. So when the thing completely ceases, then that would mean that is now there is no need to move. That means I am still. And that's what it means. So, and ultimately when you do that, then you automatically focus to self, because you're not thinking about anything. You start observing. And a lot of times in practices people do few other things to make sure that you are observing yourself. For example, they close your eyes. And then you see something in your eyes. If you close your eyes, you will see something. Things are moving, lights are moving, this and that. You start observing that, whatever that, but don't attach any meaning to it. Then it is observation. If you start meaning to it, then again your mind is working. And so you don't want to do that. It takes a lot of practice to get to that. But anyway, which is where Swadhyaya means self-study. So you can study, then you are studying yourself. And that is a important thing. Why we are doing this? Because we are doing for this. And that is important because that is the way you can be yourself. And that means you will be healthy. And that's the whole connection here. Now in in second chapter of Patanjali, this is first chapter. This one is the first chapter, second sutra. This is second chapter's first sutra. It's related to that. Here I said Swadhyaya. Now what is the Swadhyaya? Tapah Swadhyaya Ishwar Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. In the Kriya Yoga Kriya means to do something. So then now initially you just stilling, but now when you are practiced enough, and then when you even do something, you will just do without putting your own thoughts. In sciences we have hypothesis, for example. According to yoga, hypothesis is no good way to do science, because you have already made up your mind, you're looking for something. In this case, you want to, in every action, you are only with the action. We are not thinking about anything else. So that is the Kriya Yoga. And if I'm talking, I'm also doing Kriya Yoga, I'm walking, because something is always happening, so there is always some activity going on. When you are with the activity, then it's Kriya Yoga. And how do we get to that one? Tapa, it means penance. It means basically in English translation, it's just you are willing to take trouble. Whether it's I'm giving this talk, I'm making something, so I'm taking that trouble. Unless I do that, I wouldn't be able to get somewhere to do something. And Swadhyaya means when you do penance, you also study yourself. How do you feel? How do you believe? How do you take it? And then you need to, this Ishwar Pranidhanani is a long word. Ishwara means, many times people think God. Many times people translate, if you look for English translation, you will find it to be God. Pranidhanani, it means that you devote yourself to, you make it as ideal. You make an ideal what? Ishwara. Ishwara in yoga is defined differently. It means when you are beyond pain and pleasure, beyond profit and loss, basically beyond looking for your own comfort or your own well-being. If you're beyond, that's not a purpose for you, then that you have reached the state of Ishwara. And of course, most of us think that it is difficult for us to do. That's why we think only God that can do this. And that's why the word translation comes from. But this is supposed to be followed. We are supposed to get there. Because then only you can see, if I'm affected by pain and pleasure, then I wouldn't be able to see things the way they are. I will only see it from my perspective. So this is why you take trouble, you study yourself, and with the goal of reaching this state in all your actions, then you will be able, you are then moving in that direction. And so the other word to know is then you need to know your nature at that point. If you are fully aware of your nature, this is here Swadhyaya means study yourself, Dharma means whatever our nature is, Swa means ours. So when we know our nature, then only we can think of being independent. Because if as long as we are affected by everybody else or we are following somebody else, even if that may be your teacher, then you are not in yourself and then you will not be healthy. This is from Bhagavad Gita. It says, Swadharme nidhanam sreya paradharmo bhayava. Means living in our own nature, it is better to die within our nature because we will be happy with that. Rather than if we start following somebody else, because even if we are alive, we will always be in tension and trouble. So, natural action is what the karma is, without any attachment. If whatever you do karma without attachment, and then only you have freedom. Otherwise you do not have freedom. So, you have to do something anyway, but not attach yourself into that. That's what the freedom is, so then you can get to the freedom. And unless you get the freedom, you will not be able to connect yourself with the independence. And that's the basic idea. And then the health comes only. Then when you have independence, you have freedom, and then you understand then you can be in yourself, and that you will be healthy. And that's the whole idea. Then when you have being within oneself is true equality. If I'm looking for how you are, whatever your position is, whatever this thing is, I'm looking at all around myself, and I'm thinking about equality, that is stupid, because no matter what law can somebody make, no two people can be ever equal. But if I'm living within myself and then understanding myself, then I'm equal to anybody, because I don't need to compare with anybody. I can just do whatever I do and whatever the other person does, just fine. So this is the yogic way of getting into this freedom, independence and equality. And so then if you have these, then you really do not have any stress. 80% of the visits to doctors and hospitals, according to CDC, is because of stress. So if you can get rid of stress, 80% you are already healthy. And that is very important to know. Now the science piece comes. Science is considered at the crossroad for last several decades actually, where we are trying to understand the how to take science and how to make the society better, at least in the terms of health and also in planet. So you see, the science is acceptable language of material, social, economic and political understanding. That's why even you have political science, you have economic science. Everybody wants to social science. It's kind of for those who are really kind of hard science people, it becomes very difficult for them to think like how you can do it in social science, because there are certain assumptions made which is kind of difficult to meet. Society has issues which need scientific solutions and social applications. Health has become a global issue and needs more natural and global approach, which means science in an expanded way, not science. Of course, we have learned quite a bit of science. We have created a lot of things in science. But then, if you want to apply that thing to the society, to the whole planet, at the global level, then you have to expand the science also. So that it is not that we as a scientist we should think that I know my chemistry, I am a chemist, and I can now explain everybody else's problem. That's not going to be. So it is a mutual thing. So one of the approaches is that of Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a very ancient medical system, or health system, I should say, not medical system, actually I should say health system, and in India, and it is very well connected to the philosophical moorings of India. And in that one, the way they think of health is that whatever your nature is, if you are in that nature, you are healthy. So whatever your nature is, that is like in today's we have 118 elements. There are at least 17, 18 elements very heavily involved in our body. for our operations. So we think that is which is what we use as a markers many times. We have different kind of metals, what conditions of day, and of course when you look at other molecules which are made of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and things like that. So you use them as a biomarker, and then we think that that will explain whatever is happening to us. But Ayurveda has different idea. It has idea of these 5 elements in which you have earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And this is, earth is just is a kind of representation. It's not exactly just earth. It's like gross material, anything that is very gross material. Water is something that can flow. Fire is something that you can feel the energy. And air is something also very free. It is freely flowing. And ether is something you cannot see. You can only maybe have an effect, indirect effect. It's something that is not any of this. But interesting thing is, in everything, all of them there. Even if you take this table has 5 elements. It maybe has more gross, earth element is much more, but it is not that it doesn't have the other elements. Which basically means this water is not really water. It's a quality of water. So all of them is just like I have eyes, but I don't see unless there is a power behind my eyes. The same way, water is not water unless there is the thing that is behind this. And that kind of things are very important to consider when we are looking at that. So these 5 elements, and they make living body, but they are not, the living body is made of these, but the living body is not by itself. It has other things connected to it. And the thing that is connected to is that you have the mind. If we are talking about human being or anything else, there is equivalent to mind. And the mind has 3 types: Rajas, Sattvic, and Tamas. So that is mind. And then combination of these mind and these 5 elements, you get this definition of these 3 types of dosas or body types. And they are called Pitta, Kapha, and Vata. So this is some kind of expression of these 5 elements and these 3 types of mind is an expression of that in here. That is almost like we have in our body we have, let's say we have mitochondria. Or mitochondria's expression may be that you have some ATP is made. So we can measure ATP to find out whether mitochondria is working well or not. The same way is here, if you have Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, you can find, and this is everybody is born with this these constituents, and if you remain in your constituents, then you are. This is a expression of what I was saying, swastha. It is a measurement in that sense. If you maintain that balance, then you are. This is a good indication that you are in yourself, and so you will be healthy. If there is a variation in Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which means that there is a disbalance now, and you may have disease. Now all this thing is also affected not only with mind but also with self or Atma. Atma can be defined also as a soul for not exactly soul, but for various cultures, religious culture or spiritual cultures, they will be able to maybe equate more with the soul than just calling it Atma or self. But it is something that is connected to all of us, which is the Paramatma or the Brahm in their concept, or everything that you can, whatever we can say. And so this is connected to that, and that means it also affects, and it also get affected, because depending on how many people, if I connect with everybody, or if I hate someone, if I don't like because I don't connect, then it all is going to create effect finally in our body and our health. So that's how this is all connected to that. Now I just want to say a little bit about where the 5 elements come from, where they are, how they are equivalent to science, how we can study. Now dharma is the nature. Nature creates all this thing that we see in this world. Actually this Padartha means the meaning of things. Whatever, anything you see what it means to you, whatever it means, it doesn't matter what it means, then that is Padartha. And the Padartha has these 7 elements. One of them is substance, they call it Dravya, it could also be loosely translated as matter. Quality, of course we know whatever the quality is, something may be very bright or something may be very dull, all that kind of stuff. And action means whatever happens, the karma. Now these three are very important, relatively easy to understand, but all of them are also, they have some kind of a group of activity, a group of quality, a group of substances. So this is very important, that group is also very important. And then within the group it has its own identity. So it is not separate. It is within a group, but it still has an identity. And then question is, now there is some quality that if you separate them, then they will not be the same. So they have to be together, and that you have to make sure that under certain conditions, for example, in this room, as long as the door is closed, we are here. We cannot go there, and that behavior will be different than if I'm free to leave. My behavior could be very different. And then there is the last one is very important, is the what is not here. It is very important. For example, in biology, we have hydrophobic and hydrophilic. So hydrophobic is something is away from, but the fact that I am away from something which is there or not there will affect what I do. So this is also very important part for everything. So this comes from nature. Whatever we see, whatever we feel is padarthas, and all these things are part of the padarthas. This is very important thing to understand, and I am very interested in trying to understand more. So now, typical chemistry, we have these elements, we have energy, we make compounds, and we can explain what is the matter. From Dravya's perspective, these 5 elements, and then time is, well, I'll come to time. This self and mind we already talked about. So self and mind and 5 elements, that's 7. But then 2 other things get added, and space and time. Space and time. Now, if you remember any of the experiment we do in science, if they are not affected by time, then we can study them as scientifically. So this is very important requirement of science. Second one is space, which is kind of difficult to understand. If you add any of these things, their quality and action will change. If you add any of these things, the quality and action will change. So we need to find out. I got interested. The chemistry, I know if you put time, the reaction will occur and something will happen. So I know I can see the difference. But how to add a space was an issue for me. I was not able to understand that. So the way I understood this, because I work with botulinum toxins, and botulinum toxin is very dangerous. It's 100 billion times more toxic than cyanide. So if a tiny amount of it, nanogram amount, if it gets into your body, you get paralyzed. So it's very, people have to be in intensive care. They need the breathing equipment to be able to live. On the other hand, this is also a Botox. So it can make people look good, it removes wrinkles. So there are 2 different actions. One makes you sick, other one makes you look beautiful. So that means at least I can say what is different between 2, because quality and action defines what is the matter, what substance that is. So if you look at what happens in this, if you use 100 picogram, you inject in certain areas, it will remove the wrinkles. But if you put 100 nanograms, then it will kill you. So the difference is the amount, but what it is from chemistry point of view is because the space is the same. If you put more amount, that means concentration is increased. Now, of course, we know that the concentration is very well known phenomenon in science, but I'm just bringing it from the perspective of this Vedic science. So then if you use 100 nanograms, that means if you give the molecule less space, if the molecule has sufficient space, it is very happy and everything works well. The same way, just like you see here, somebody sitting very nicely in office versus somebody is very crowded and looks not very comfortable. This is true for everything. Here some teacher ate a pound of salt and he died at the end because he thought he could eat. But we need about 10 grams of salt every day. But having 500 grams, the space is same, the molecule got less space, and then it became toxic. So that's a phenomenon that is I'm trying to explain how the space plays a role in behavior. And so now going back to this body and dosas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and they are affected by many other things, because this Vata, Pitta, Kapha, I just told a little bit of the science which is related to the Ayurveda, and it's related to Vedic philosophy, that gives this Vata, Pitta, Kapha as the body dosas, and they are affected by the three types of mind, which is psychic. A lot of events can affect these, and then your behavioral situation, how we behave ourselves, that also affects it. Dietary errors also be affected. Seasonal changes also affected, depending on how sensitive someone is. It may change if the temperature, you go out and temperature changes, then you feel uncomfortable and sometimes you get cold and other kind of things, because that really causes disbalance in your body dosha, or they call it prakriti or nature. Vikriti is something when it is not in this balanced state, then it becomes vikriti or diseased. So that's how we can explain that. And there is now this used to be considered as only a Ayurveda, and we thought that in how to explain in modern science. And this is my last slide. How to explain it in modern science. So of course we have from modern science we have biochemical profiles, we have biological processes and metabolism and pathways. And so what they did, they looked at people who have these types of dosas. There's some has Vata, Pitta and Kapha, and they did this for males separately and females. And they found that if you have some profile, for example zinc, then you find that it is in Kapha it's more positive, is found more. In Vata is not there, and they did not do NS, means they indicate not significant or no difference among Prakriti type. They did not find a difference. But here in Vata is lot more, in Kapha is lot more than in Vata. The same way is biological process like regulation of transferase activity. You see positive in Vata and positive in Kapha, but not in Pitta. So you can basically create a profile based on cytokines or like receptors and the protein import into nucleus, cell cycle, apoptosis. All this, the different kind of parameters were looked at, and they found there is actually you can see there is a difference Vata versus Pitta versus Kapha. And then if you really go across here, you see here you see the effect on this regulation of transferase activity, but you do not see significant difference in the females, but you see in the males. So you can just see that in general you can find that there is a difference. So the Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which comes from these 5 elements and 3 types of mind, which then eventually makes balance of your health, has a scientific basis. You can distinguish these. They are not just something like people just say just a name. When we do clinical trial, obviously we don't do these considerations. We just take people's maybe age group, maybe we do take gender, but we do not distinguish this kind of thing. But obviously they will have differences when they are going to be given certain types of drugs. So all I'm trying to explain in this, from Vedic perspective, there is a system which is holistic system. Everything is integrated to everything, and that if you can use from outside world and to get into the inside world, where by yoga practice, by understanding yourself, by detaching yourself, if you are in yourself, you most likely will be balanced in your prakriti or dosas, and you will be healthy. You can, if you're not, it can be diagnosed by this your dosas, that there is a disbalance. There is a way to diagnose that, and then they can find ways, which is natural ways, whether they change you or tell you to change your lifestyle or change you some diet or give you some herbs, and by that they can help you fix that. But it is really until eventually it's up to you to keep your health. And since that is the way they do it, from modern science point of view, that is associated with biochemical pathways, biochemical markers, and the cellular structure, that all that we have. That since that is connected, and you can see the difference in males and females, that means we can also examine this scientifically. Are we there? Are we going to be there soon? I'm not very sure. It's very complicated because it's very holistic. And so, but I believe that nothing is beyond science. We need to make an effort, and we find a resource, both intellectual resource, financial resource, material resource, and time. I think we will be able to get there, and I think that will be much better than what I think we have today. What the science can benefit, and scientific approach can benefit to understand the Ayurveda, which is the Vedic way of trying to keep health. And I think this is one of the areas that my group is very interested. We are doing several aspects of it. I do not have time to talk about that in this talk, but we are doing however, for example, how the Ayurvedic herbs, or let's say medicine, Ayurvedic treatments, how are they decided, how they are developed compared to the drug development process that even my lab does. So I can distinguish those two. And one of the ideas that was in here, and I had skipped earlier, is this. So what they do is they look at these qualities of these Panch Mahabhutas. So when they want to develop drugs, for example, air has a quality of touch. So if you have some arthritis problem, for example, that's considered an air problem. So the massage of certain types of oils will help. As an example, if you have problem which is not related to the air, fire, water, earth disbalance, but it is something to do with ether, the sound is the nature of the ether. So then you may have to listen to certain types of, they will prescribe you certain types of music or chanting or mantra, and they think that's how they try to bring the balance. So this just gives you just a very brief taste of how the drugs or treatments are developed in Ayurveda versus what we do in modern science, which is, we screen things against DNA, genes, or some assays, some biochemical enzymes, and eventually we screen it, do testing in animals, and when we find out toxicity, then we do clinical trials, and then eventually we develop drugs. The development of treatment in Ayurveda is something like this. In most of the time, something to do with smell, taste, shape, or touch, or kind of music. It's kind of detailed. I don't understand a lot of it, but I think I have gotten some gist of it, so we have begun some research in this area also. Mm. Thank you very much. If you have any questions,
yes, I have a lot of questions. Firstly, on this one, what's the association with these different mahabhutas, and we have told about diet, so hot and cold foods. So is there any relationship to hot or cold food?
Yes. Yeah? So it's related to everything. Let's see. Yeah, here. So if the diet is very important to affect the Vata Pitta Kapha, and hot and cold, sour or sweet, bitter, astringent, all these tastes, these are part of the taste. So when you're talking about hot and cold, this will come in the if it is hot and cold in terms of food, its taste will be different. Mm-hmm. If you're taking hot and cold food, the cold food tastes differently than hot food. At least one difference will be the taste is very important. So we think that taste is only because of whether I like or not like, but how do we taste the taste? From biochemistry point of view, obviously there are a lot of receptors. Those receptors, when they get some taste, intensity of the taste, so they just don't taste and sit there. They have the biochemical pathways. So signal transduction begins when you taste something to get to eventually to the brain, and that whole process is very important. So even hot and cold or some kind of different type of taste or different type of spices will trigger these pathways, biochemical pathways, signal transduction, that because this is my hypothesis, this is not, I think anybody has worked on this, this is my hypothesis, is that if you get your body physiology working where it's supposed to be working, and where something is missing, let's say something got stuck, and because of this taste and reaction, a lot of things get clear, and so that kind of balances back to whatever you have. So that's an answer for maybe what you're asking.
And so the body doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, can I ask you which body dosha are you?
Okay.
Or,
yeah. So you can certainly.
And over your lifetime, do you stay in the same type, or do people transform?
Then with age, there are changes occur, not necessarily in their balance or the let's say the proportion of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. With age, there are certain things do change, and some of them may be even in their proportion, but mostly they remain in the same balance. Now, to answer your question, I did not believe in any of this. I would say 6-7 years ago, and if you remember my first slide is Ayurveda Journal of Health. I'm the managing editor of it, and I had stopped this kind of, well, it was more related to astrology, because astrology can predict what kind of body type you will have. Just knowing your place of birth, date of birth, and the year, they can tell you what body type you have. And I had this gentleman his name is Jeffrey Armstrong, who is a good friend of mine, but when he said this, I didn't believe it. So when I took over the journal, I said, we are not publishing anything about astrology. And so it took him 3-4 years to convince me. And one of the things he told me is this. He said, this is something, body type, you can predict by just knowing the place, time, and the year of the birth. So, and he said, you can get it tested anyway. You tell me, just tell me somebody's name, and I will tell you what type. When they say body type is related not only to something that is invisible, but they can tell you your kind of behavior. For example, somebody who's Vata will be very skinny, and he says he can tell it before even looking at that person, but just knowing where the person is born, where that person is born and what year, he can tell. So he asked me to provide him few names, and he will convince me that this is true. So I thought maybe I'll just tell him, even though he knows me, he has seen me. But he said there are other things I will tell about that person, and that will be true. So it happened in 2012. I gave him my details. It took him some time to make the chart, and some more time for us to schedule to read my chart. He read my chart, actually gave me a disc of it, so I still have it. And people can say whatever they want to say, especially he kind of knew me, but he didn't know my background. He did not know a lot of things about me. One other thing he told me is 2013, when we were reading this, 2012 when he did it. And he said that within next 2 years, there's going to be a major change in your profession. He had no clue that I was planning to retire. Within 1 year or so, a year and a half or something, it was a major decision to change, and so I retired. And then he said, one of the other things he said was that I do not have a good relation with my father. And he had no idea that my father actually had passed away. But he kept asking me that, you don't have good relation with your father. And I said, well, I'm far away. I kind of pretended that's what he doesn't know. But he said, it's not that. I think you probably don't even have communication with phone calls or this and that. But he didn't know. Of course I didn't have. And when I told him that he died before I was born, he told me that the same situation, the planetary situation, was when I was born. And so it will be similar thing, either I will not survive or my father will not survive. Those two were quite correct. The other thing he told me, which I think is true, is what answering to your question. He said your body type is kind of all three. It may be slightly Pitta, which is true. But it was, initially I wasn't very, I thought you can say to anybody, but that's not true. So I have, my body type is, I have almost equal Vata, Pitta, Kapha. He told me, and I also know my body, based on the characteristics, because I have itchy skin. more than anybody else in my family. And so I think I'm slightly maybe not 30-33, maybe 40% and 30-30. That's my body type. And one of the things he told me was wrong also of the 4 things that I'm telling you. So 3 was right. The 4th was wrong. He said in last 1 year you must have received some major recognition and award, which was not true. I mean, sometimes little thing here and there, but nothing. That was not correct. So he was correct 75% about me. And then he has a video. I don't know whether you know Michael Skirmer. Have you heard about Michael Skirmer?
No.
He writes a skeptics column in Scientific American, and he's skeptic. And he challenged this guy with 10 or 9 or 10 unknown people reading their chart, telling them straightforward answers and see whether that's true. And his average was 78% accuracy. So I now, since then, I'm a believer in this. I want to know more about how this all happens and how can I learn more. So that's why I got more interested in trying to understand this.
Now coming back to in the Vedic system, you say it's holistic. So to what extent is it dependent on time and space? You mentioned time and space before. And what's the role of time and space?
Well, the one I was talking about is time is like how much time you give something. So for example, our body gets certain times. With time, it will change, its characteristics will change. So that's what I was talking about. I think maybe you are referring to how long ago was something. If you are referring to that, but would that be different? Let's say in 5,000 years ago, certain things will be different. Most probably they will be. I'm not even talking about this, so I hope you are understanding what I'm saying. There is one thing that you are focusing on certain thing and see how much time we give it to this and what might happen. Things will change in that thing. The other one is, what about 5 million years ago? How would the things would have been? If I was born there and I was the same age that I am today, would that be different? Yes, it will be different also, because the thing that they look at, planetary situation that they look at, is going to be different obviously at that time.
So another question, let's say in the history of Indian science, has there been cycles between holistic approaches and reductionist approaches? So in the Western science, it was reductionist for a while, and now
becoming holistic.
Maybe it's coming holistic. Do these cycles go on also in the history of Vedic science?
That's a very good question. Really, I never thought about that. So, but going through my memory of what things have happened. So yes, there has been some predominance of certain things in terms of when the science in India is called Vigyan. So when there is a Gyan is knowledge. Vigyan is when you have a specific knowledge. So there has been cycle in India in history of at least 10,000, 20,000 years when Ramayana and Mahabharata has happened. So yes, some people have developed specific knowledge, and that has gone away because with time that has gone away, and then it comes back in some form or the other. So that they call it Yuga cycle. From the Yugas, so there are you familiar with Yugas? So the Yugas supposed to have certain characteristics, and in the beginning, at least if we call it the beginning, it is a cycle, so it can begin anywhere. But in the what they consider the starting, where dharma is supposed to be fully in place, where you really don't need a lot of technology. You just automatically you are in yourself, and normally you don't need a whole lot of things. But as you go further, the weapons are created, the treatments are created because there is need to it. So that cycle will indicate maybe some answer to your question, whether this has been holistic versus more reductionist. Reductionist, I'm thinking about when you need specific weapons or specific treatments, that will be, even though it may be within the holistic parameter, but then it need to be identified. For example, you need to be treated with some kind of medicine. But when you're talking about totally holistic, which means you don't even take the medicine, because medicine is to a certain degree becomes a reductionist because you're trying to treat something. But when you are on your own, you are within yourself, without needing anything else, specific thing to come to you, and then I'm defining that as a holistic.
So if we have the astrological prediction of your body character through your place and time of birth, isn't it reductionist in some sense to say, well, we can predict what you're going to be? So what happens to this discussion of free will and determinism, if astrological determinism? Do you have those debates in Vedic science as well?
Maybe not exactly for this question that you're asking, because some of it is in today's world. The planetary positions were always important. My view, and is limited, but my view of that, what these planetary positions do to you and how this astrological determinism affects you is like this. So it's like a model. It's like we want to create some model of, I don't have it here, but botulinum toxin, for example. There are more than one type of model. So we have this cell, vesicles carrying the neurotransmitters, and then we have plasma membrane. In between there are snare proteins. So what toxin does, it cleaves them, the snare protein. So then the vesicles cannot fuse and neurotransmitter cannot be released. But when we want to create a model, what we create is we create a model. I mean, my group has not created. Oh no, we have also created like a sigil. Somebody has a saw. You can saw it. Somebody's created a it's not a dolphin. What is the other thing that's dangerous? Sea sharks. Somebody has sharks. So you want to show how ferocious it is, depending on how you want to show. Now, with that modeling idea that I have, I think that these planets and astrological things are a way to explain how things are going to happen. It apparently happens all the time. So, for example, Saturn is a huge planet, and in the astrological things is given a long time. So it's 7.5 years. And I don't remember other ones, but let's say that you have Mars or Venus. Depending on the size, the timing, how long will that last, and also it has own specific feature. So the Saturn is not only 7.5 years, but it is pretty harsh on you. So they have made this Saturn, which looks, from my point of view, let's say ugly, and then it's a big. So that it represents something that is going to happen to you based on what karma you have done. But how it will pan out in your life, this just gives you an idea. So everybody goes through those planetary cycles, and depending on how well you have done, you will get either benefit or you may get some kind of difficulty. But it does not tell exactly what will happen. So you do have your free will. I'm just trying to give you this answer. You still have your free will. It tells you where you will be. So for example, I'm standing here and I may be, if I'm talking for whatever, I don't remember how long it be, maybe 40 minutes, and I may get thirsty by standing for that long. So I will, if we were trying to keep water together, I thought that maybe I will be feeling thirsty and might get some water. So this does exactly like that. It says this is your karma, this is what you will see, but so you are prepared. Now I may decide to have water or I may not decide to have water. Maybe even I'm thirsty, but since I'm interested in continuing discussion, I do not want to break that, so I will not take this. But it is available to me. So this astrological determinism is not, it does not have that this is exactly what will happen to you. It tells you this is in the situation you will be. So you may be in a situation where people are very hostile to you. But it doesn't tell what will happen. Because you still have the free will, how you deal with it. You become lethargic, you become paralyzed, the things will be very different. You become brave and you deal with it, or become friendly, make friends with them, outcomes will be different. So it does not tell exactly what will happen. That it's not completely determinism. It does have the willpower and your free will.
Last question, can you go back to the slide before with the circle, with the earlier? Yes.
This one?
No,
This one.
That one.
Yeah.
So here if we were trying to distinguish in English the Sattva, the Raja, Tama, and then you've written Mana underneath, what's the meaning of these?
Okay. So these are very, these are the, just trying to think about an equivalent to in modern science what we use. Let's say we have ionic forces, and we have covalent bonds, and we have, what other bond we have? We have covalent and, now let's do the, ionic bonds or ionic forces, hydrophobic forces, gravitational forces, something like that. So they have their own characteristics. Ionic forces will have different type of things because it depends on ions. If their ions are there, they will see they're actually very strong. Whereas gravitational forces are only based on the mass. And so if the mass is there, it depends on how different they are, and the forces are much weaker. So if you do not have ionic, you have neutral, let's say ideal gases. So there is some forces, but there is no ionic forces because these are very inert. You have some forces there also. So it's something like that. So in one of the ways to explain, just like in we might use ionic forces to explain ionic bond. We might use ionic forces to explain electricity or potential. So something like that. It's the same concept, but differences in where we want to use it. So same way, I'm going to tell one way how to explain this. So people who are very sattvic, who are dominated with sattva, they are very naturally, they are very calm and peaceful, detached, caring, very generous, charitable, not get stressed out, whether they get food or not, naturally. So they kind of know the situation it is, and they naturally behave according to the situation. That's normally sattvic people. And tamasic people are the people who are always worried, concerned, not clear, blaming somebody, looking for something, that kind of thing. Rajasic people are in between. So they may not be able to naturally act like that, but if somebody tells them, they accept it and they do it. So that's those three. The other explanation is sattvic people will never bother anybody. They will just be themselves. If you want to follow them, follow them. If you don't want to follow them, it's okay. They don't care. So they know that reality. They practice themselves and don't bother anybody. Tamasic people most likely know wrong things, but impose on everybody else that this is the truth. You got to do like this. If you don't do that, you are worth nothing. Whatever they will say. If they are drinking, they will like you to drink also. And if they are doing some bad thing, they would like you to go with them. They might be very rough to people, take advantage, exploit them, and they think that's a great idea. And we are very smart people, like survival of the fittest type of people. And Rajasic people are again in the middle, where if they know, they can understand what is real. They're not on their own. But if somebody sattvic person tells them, then they are actually good manager. So they will know the reality because somebody told them, and then they will be almost like them, except that they will now be doing the right kind of thing. So they will be very enforcing. That's why you probably hear about the Maharajas, the kings in India were known as Rajas. So they are supposed to have this, and that's why they always had ministers who were almost like that to deal with it. And then these people were always the people against. So, it is. I mean, I'm just explaining in three ways to your question. But this is something that we all have. None of us have. At least I don't have the only sattva, only rajas or tamas. I probably have all of them. It may be the proportionality, and sometimes it depending on what time of the day or month or year is, or in what kind of situation, which will be expressed more.
And mana means?
Mana means mind.
Mind. And
mind.
atma means soul, or?
Atma means soul.
Right.
Mana means mind, so mind is the one which has these three types.
And body and mind are integrated or separate?
They are absolutely integrated, all of them integrated. So this is just, again, I'm using scientific analogy to separate things to show this how this works. Just like we were going to explain this body in terms of modern science, we will be explaining carbohydrates, lipids and proteins and nucleic acids or something like that.
So as you said, Ayurveda is a health system, not a medical system. It's more broader.
Yeah, it's a actual meaning of Ayurveda is Veda means knowledge, which is same as science, by the way. You know, the Scientica, the word that comes, which also means knowledge, is the same meaning as Vedas. The Ayur means life, so it is not a medical system. It is the system of life, and that's why it has everything that happens if you will be healthy. So it's a health-related system indirectly.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
It's
Thank
most
you.
informative. Thank you.
Thank you.